was only covered 1 week worth of timeline from, 1830, in April of 1830 to April of 1830. That was it. But this last episode covered almost a year spans. So, for the most part, they're really, really slow paced, but that allows us to really dig into the sources, go to different sources and see how they bicker about certain topics and, try and get a feel for what the field of Mormon history is all about, because it's anything but straightforward.
Yeah, I was going to mention, you say that it's slow pace. I say that it's just the history is that dense. If you do it any faster, you're going to miss stuff that's going to, affect history that happens later on, which that's kind of an oxymoron. But, future events in the timeline, you're going to miss those things if you don't explain it now. A lot of the other things in the future timeline, it's not going to make a lot of sense. All right.
Yeah, I find myself running into that all the time with it, with the history too, because I'll come along something in the timeline where a character does something, and I'm like, when the hell did that character get into the timeline? And I have to look back and say, oh wow, they got into the timeline a year ago, and they've done all of this up to this point. This was just the biggest thing that set them apart. So then I have to go onto the show and say, okay, this person did this and this and this. This is where they got in. And now that leads us to what happens when we're talking about our timeline here. And so I have to jump back all the time, and that's why the nicknames really help. I put nicknames, anybody that's important enough in the timeline, I give them all nicknames because it's so much easier to construct that person in your head and see an actual person there instead of just a name. So.
Yeah. Again, like I said, you say slow pace, I just say rich, dense history.
Do you occasionally suffer from bouts of rationality, cognizance, and literacy? Are you constantly baffled by the failure of your fellow hominids to comprehend simple principles like evidence, statistical significance, confirmation bias, and logic? Do your jaws ache from constantly holding your tongue in polite company? Do you find yourself tempted to stand on tables and scream, "The Bible also says rabbits chew their cud"? That's not an allegory, and I'm not reading it out of context, you frothing nincompoops. It's just wrong! Well, then we have the book for you. The Scathing Atheist presents Diatribes, Volume 1, 50 Essays from a Godless Misanthrope. This collection of epic rants was painstakingly chosen as the 50 best diatribes presented on the Scathing Atheist podcast out of the first 50. It's as effective against headaches as homeopathy, as accurate at predicting the future as astrology, more powerful than a power band bracelet, more efficient than a dowsing rod, and more potent than prayer. So look for it at an online ebook retailer near you or find it at scathingatheist.com. Diatribes, Volume 1, 50 Essays from a Godless Misanthrope by No Illusions.
Claims in this ad have not been evaluated by the FDA. Ebooks may be harmful or fatal if swallowed. If you experience an erection lasting more than 4 hours, you must be doing something right.
All right. I want to shift gears a little bit. You've explained a little bit of the history. And again, if anybody wants to go more in depth, like I said, nakedmormonism.com. Again, like I said, I wanted to shift gears a little bit to more of your personal experience in the church before you got out. Can you tell us, we've all heard stories about how, Mormons are supposed to be, this happy-go-lucky, religion.
It's all the meds.
Let's touch on the all-encompassing culture of the LDS church, especially around the Salt Lake City area and all that kind of stuff. Can you, give us your personal experience on how that works?
I'll do my best. How's that?
Okay.
So Mormonism is really insular. It's kind of in the way like practicing Jews are. There's like a lot of little special words you have to know, and like a lot of things in the culture that you're exposed to every day that are just part of it. But if you leave, an insular Jewish culture, you're not going to get that anywhere else. And that's how it is with Mormonism too, especially like, Davis County Mormonism or, like Salt Lake City, Latter-day Saints Mormonism. So it's, when I said Mormonese earlier, that's a problem I run into all the time is I speak in Mormonese too much because there's so many words like Book of Mormon characters and, special rites and rituals that you have to do every Sunday that people just aren't familiar with. I ran into this a lot on the My Book of Mormon podcast, and for anybody that doesn't know, that's the My Book of Mormon podcast is a show where David Michael reads the Book of Mormon and the Pearl of Great Price, and now he and I have teamed up to read the Doctrine and Covenants because it's just a bullet point list of how to run the church, basically, and it's boring without any historical context. So,
and hopefully I'll have David on eventually.
There you go. Yeah, that could be very cool. He's a fun guy to talk to. But we recently read Doctrine and Covenants section 20, which is a section that is different than so much of the rest of the Doctrine and Covenants, and it's because it's set out as this like foundational text or foundational structure for the Mormon like day-to-day rituals, or like their every Sunday rituals, and how the power structure is set up in the church and everything. So it was really unique. It was different from anything else that we've read up to this point. And I realized at that point just how weird Mormonism is in comparison to so many other Christianities, because I would start talking about, an elder can do this, an elder can baptize and confirm people, but then, a priest can only baptize somebody if they're given consent by their bishop, and they can stand in the circle, for the blessing or the confirmation, but they can't actually offer the prayer, but they can, offer the baptism before the confirmation prayer. And then I started talking about stuff like this, and David Michaels was like, dude, whoa, slow down. Cause I was using so many Mormonese words that are just, strict to Mormonism alone, where, these words may have meaning outside of Mormonism, but in Mormonism alone, they have much more meaning. So that's kind of
the second time I've heard you say that, and I really don't get it.
Exactly. And that's the problem, is there's so much of this, in coming out into the real world, I'm understanding how much of a distinction there is between the Mormon fairy tale land versus, the real world where everybody else in the world actually lives and operates. And, as far as the distinctions, Mormonism is just, it's weird, but it's not really quantifiable in any way. It's unique, but only in its own way. It's, it is just another branding of Christianity, but they do have their own little special proprietary books. It's very cultural in the way that it's, either you're a Mormon, or you're a convert, or you're an anti-Mormon, or you've never heard of the church. So there's nothing, ex-Mormons are not really, recognized as being anything distinct from an anti-Mormon, which is just an absolute shame. And, as the culture itself, like I said, it's so hard to try and quantify in any specific way, but it is, it's very unique in its own way, in much the way that, Jewish people or, Jehovah's Witnesses or any of these very insular religions are. It's its own thing.
Well, you're saying that it's insular, but one of the things I wanted to touch on was in the Salt Lake City area, there's a great analogy like you just did about Hasidic Jews and all that kind of stuff. From what I understand, someone can be born, grow up, have a life and a family and everything, and then die and never really go outside of their little area, in Salt Lake City, because everything that they need is right there. Their support group, grocery stores, everything is right there for you, and you don't have to ever go anywhere. So whenever you come if you leave that, nice little bubble there, you're completely just out on your own, right?
Yeah, and I think you said that really well. One thing that I find, Mormons can go anywhere in the world. They can travel the world. They can spend 2 years on a mission in a completely different part of the world and never absorb anything else that the rest of the world has to offer. It's so amazing. They can go buy all the touristy crap. They can go to Paris and they can take all the pictures, but they don't ever take away any of the real world experiences that the rest of the world has to offer, because they feel like they have everything that they need already. All of their needs, intellectual, spiritual, and otherwise, are being fulfilled, so they don't have any need for searching that out anywhere else. And I find that to be a shame. The way that I heard a Mormon apostle talk about it in a YouTube video just a few days ago actually was really revealing. He said, "We feel like Christianity is kind of the grade school where everybody has to go, and that's where, everybody learns about Christianity, learns about Jesus. Well, we just feel like like Mormons or we just feel like the church is kind of like the college version of Christianity, where we have it, we have everything boiled down to almost a science, basically, of what Christianity really is and the rites and rituals that are necessary for salvation, and the denominations, the inside denominations in heaven, the terrestrial, telestial, celestial kingdoms, the three denominations inside the celestial kingdom. They have all of these ideas about what Christianity is supposed to be, because they have the restored gospel. And that's what Joseph Smith did, is he restored the original gospel that Jesus brought back to the earth. A lot of Christians would argue that it was never lost, because we've had the Bible since, a few hundred years after Jesus was born and died. But, I don't really want to get mired into that too much. But Mormonism feels like it's just one cut above all other Christianity. Like, everybody else believes in Christianity, but they don't have everything necessary to get their own planet and become their own gods. And that's why Mormonism is so cool, because we know it and nobody else does. So that's kind of that plays into the insular mindset, and almost like an elitist mindset, where it's like a Christian exceptionalist mindset, where like ours is better than everybody else's, and if you follow any of the other ones, you're just not as good as us, basically.
Yeah. A lot of that stuff we're going to come back to, because you just said some really interesting stuff, but we'll come back to that.
All right.
Piggybacking off of that question, the all-encompassing culture of the LDS Church, what has been your experience with the ex-Mormon community? Because I know they're pretty tight-knit too, aren't they?
They are. It's actually surprising. It was a community that I wasn't aware existed until I started listening to David Michaels' show, the My Book of Mormon podcast, and I really started getting exposed to the ex-Mormon community and aware of its existence in general. It's a lot less exclusive than Mormonism is. I mean, because anybody that has been a Mormon for any given amount of time, they can walk into an ex-Mormon meetup and be like, hey, how about that kolob? And everybody's like, oh, come here, give us a hug, right? So, I mean, everybody knows, if somebody's been a Mormon before for any amount of time, they're invited in the ex-Mormon community. And I see that it's, fairly wide and fairly open that way. And the best part about the ex-Mormon community is all the shared jokes. Like just even walking into a party and saying, how about kolob? I mean, just knowing all of the inside words and knowing about second anointings and knowing about all of these things really, it's like being a white guy at a white guy's party, right? If you're not a white guy at a white guy's party, you stand out and people know, hey, how's this not white guy here? But if everybody's a whole bunch of white guys at a white guy party, all the inside jokes exist. The same thing happens with Mormonism. And it's a very loving community, though. I've really enjoyed being part of it a lot.
The way you explain it sounds a lot like Norm walking into the Cheers bar, Norm!
Yeah, right.
Or wait a minute, I guess I'm showing my age there. You may not even know what that means.
No, I've seen Cheers. I was just way too young to ever actually get into it. So, my apologies.
Oh, trust me, you don't have to apologize. I just know I'm an old shit. So,
you feel free to follow it up. You damn millennial and whatnot. Feel free.
Oh, okay. Another. I know that you didn't go on missionary work, but I know that's something really important to the Mormon faith. Can you explain why it's so important, and does it actually ever work? Like here in the States, I know maybe overseas it might, but what's the significance of it, and does it ever convert anyone?
So yeah, the missionary force is something very, very, very important to the church. So your entire growing up life, especially as a male, not so much as a female in the church, but young men in the church really get a heavy burden put on them of when you turn a certain age, you are going on your mission, and that's that. And I saw a lot of friends go through this same struggle, basically, where they really, really didn't want to go on their missions, but it was the expected thing. Everybody had been telling them they were going to be doing it when they got to whatever age was necessary. And That it just happened. It was like it was written in the sand, and there was no way of, it was written in stone, and there was no way of erasing it. They had to go on their mission. And it's a burden that a lot of Mormons share, and it does play into a fairly high suicide rate. In fact, one of the highest suicide rates for young teens in Utah, just because they're put under a lot of pressure, not just for missions, but for just being righteous and pious in general. So originally, that if it helps at all to understand how effective it is, the missionary force is basically the pyramid scheme, right? It's a pyramid salesman scheme.
Ponzi